Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Agricultural meteorologist Greg Soulje is back with us here on this Tuesday. Welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Nice to be with you. Hopefully, one and all are staying cool and comfortable in sort of a weird weather setup. We'll put it that way. Compliments of, it's now officially known as a strong El Nino, which is continuing to cook away. And some folks over Canada and the plains and upper Midwest are doing just that with these temperatures still ongoing for the next few days.
Yeah, you got us back in the sauna, it feels like. Maybe a little less humidity than a couple weeks ago, but It's still quite toasty out there.
Yes.
Your slides are up. Why don't you go ahead and give us that forecast?
All right, very good. We shall. And off to the races here on a Tuesday, mid-stretch of July, and at least the mid-stretch, the middle point just about of meteorological summertime. Yes, it always flies by, but still a fair amount of summertime on the weather maps and charts, but also dealing with this strengthening El Nino setup around here. And the heat will not be long-lasting for some folks across the middle part of the country. We'll take a look at that in just a second. But some of the Corn Belt highlights continue to be, and thank goodness most areas are well watered down. Was at Historic Farm Days in Penfield, Illinois on Friday. Missed out on their Saturday rains, which came through at 1 to 2 in some spots, 3 to 4 inches. There have been 5 to 10, almost 12 inches of rain since late June in the parts of the far southern Corn Belt areas of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and southward south of the Ohio. So some of these areas, including up to the north, despite some drier areas, are doing relatively well, in quotes, dealing with the heat. A lot of silking corn I saw on my run down I-57 and U.S., at least Illinois Route 49 in eastern Illinois about a week or so ago. The worst of the heat of all places is in some of those drier areas of the upper Midwest, northern Great Lakes region, and back west of the Mississippi. So apart from that, things kind of continue to mosey along and move along pretty good lickety split. Again, here's some of the worst drought-ridden areas. This was last week's drought monitor, and it's where the heat is really lined up. Would you believe the Arrowhead of Minnesota, the Dakotas? It was as far west as Utah and Big Sky Country. It's built as far north as some of those spring grain areas, and it's not the right time of the year to get heat, let alone 95 to 100 to locally 102 degree heat. They've seen up across the areas of southern Canada, west of Sault Ste. Marie, and north of the Boundary Waters of Minnesota. But everyone else in the rest of the Corn Belt are in good shape. And actually, there were some drowned-out field evidence on the drive down to eastern Illinois late last week. And coming back out of that Friday, actually, there were a couple of good downpours and some repotting some of these fields as well. But as a whole, I think we're doing relatively well. I think the Illinois crop rating, corn crop rating is about 55, 58%, I think, if I saw correctly, in the good to excellent category. And everyone else is kind of in that 2/3 of a category for both corn and soybeans. Anyway, back into the plains, got a couple of showers and thunderstorms out through parts of Big Sky Country. The first in a series of cold fronts are going to slowly nibble away, knock down, erode away the warm ridge, the hot ridge, the 500 millibar closed high, whatever you want to call it. Right or wrong in the nomenclature up there. Otherwise, yesterday, here's just a little smattering of record highs: 105 at Bismarck, 103 at Dickinson. It was 102 in western upper Michigan and 102 in some of these areas out towards, for example, Sioux Lookout, a couple of hours north of the Boundary Waters of Minnesota. And it's not the greatest time because there are, the spring grain areas are moving into the grain fill stage, and you've got this heat and you're already kind of marginally dry. So we'll see what transpires. And of course, we keep track in some areas. 79% of the U.S. barley crop is headed at the current time. So that continues to move along relatively well. Still unsettled of all places. We've kind of juxtapositioned we flipped it the other way, where wet weather and cool relative to the southern states is underway in through Texas, the Cotton Belt country, and the southeastern part of the country. Been nibbling away at the dryness and drought-related issues over the southeastern part of the country. We had some pretty good rainfall just south of some of the hill country of Texas, down to the Rio Grande, for example. Again, another setup of an old frontal boundary. It's too warm up aloft to move that boundary to the north, so we just will continue to rain out some of these echoes into the southern plains areas of Texas and along the Gulf Coast area. And they'll take any more rain they can get across South Carolina. 66% short, very short, 59% short, very short. That would be South Carolina and North Carolina's topsoil moisture, respectively. Visible satellite picture, nothing going on, nothing cooking over the next generally 5 to 7 days across the Atlantic. A lot of wind shear. There have been some the maps and charts just based because on the warmth of these Gulf waters and an old boundary. We may try to get a little tropical enhancement to some of the showers and thunderstorms over coastal sections of the Gulf, eastern areas, and in through Florida in the coming days. Don't think it'll be anything named. If it's named, it's short-lived. Probably greater likelihood we'll get going on named features across the Pacific, of which a couple may likely throw significant moisture into the west. The divide on westward enhance the monsoon setup, and when that happens, that's more you go for literally from a drought and fires to a flood. So there's some indication of that in some of our longer range weather maps and charts about probably 7 to 10 days out from there. Southeastern states on the drought monitor, the worst of it's still North Carolina and South Carolina. Some improvement through Georgia, more so into Alabama, and making some headway in some of the rainy season echoes of showers and thunderstorms across the Florida peninsula. So the monsoon setup is getting going across the west. Temperatures, again, the worst have moved into the Canadian Prairie by and large, and east of the divide. The potential for maybe a couple of showers and thunderstorms, dry base that may spark new fires, and this will be a little farther north out of Utah into parts of the Pacific Northwest and maybe northern Great Basin area. And it's because of this ongoing dryness and drought across the western states, either side of the divide, Montana in best order compared to everybody else. And you can see how it applies to the rest of the country on dryness, drought-related issues. Big improvement, by the way, over the Northeast and New England. Just a couple of 2 or 3 months ago, they were in the pretty much thick of it with ongoing dryness and drought. Fires, probably at least isolated to maybe somewhat elevated threat for fire weather into the western parts of the Carolinas, the western Dakotas, and parts of Wyoming, and a little drier than we'd like it to be, and maybe that may spark something, as mentioned, in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. And there are the fire concerns building back into the valleys of California and still holding on across the northern and central plains for the day tomorrow. There is a visible satellite picture. Boy, you can see wide and expansive high pressure. You can almost circle it on there on whatever magic marker you got in hand, as far north as, again, into the southern grain areas of Canada. It concludes at the Red River Valley of the South. It goes as far west as the divide and east almost to the Atlantic, or at least in the mid-Atlantic region. And there it is. That's the winds up aloft. They are unusually weak, as you would expect, with high pressure up aloft, but the strength and scope of high pressure up aloft. And this is basically based at about 25,000 feet. This is the ridge, the closed high, the sinking air. And yeah, it's amazing. You can come up with temperatures pushing the 100-degree mark, or at least into the 90s on some sense of a northerly wind flow. And that's usually the trip off that you're just really weighting down, compressing down, squeezing down the atmosphere, and that builds pressure. Engine shop, atmosphere, and weather. There you go. And that's one of the reasons why we have such incredible warmth over parts of the northern plains. You can see a couple of ripples in a easterly flow from east to west. The upper level winds are flowing off the Atlantic into the Gulf and across the Gulf Coast areas of Texas. There's the surface high, pretty strong for the time of year, centered across Iowa, extending the mid-Atlantic region, a couple little diffuse systems across the western states, and an old frontal boundary down across Dixie. A visible satellite picture, tough to see because there's just not going on. A little cirrus near them into the Chicagoland area, parts of Michigan, northern Indiana, and Ohio. Those heat advisories that are in effect into northern Indiana, northern Ohio, into Michigan, as well as Wisconsin. There's the surface weather map with the shower activity underlying it in through Texas, a couple of scattered activity outbreaks into the southeastern states, parts of Quebec, and across the west, getting into some showers and thunderstorms at this hour, of which will be expanding this afternoon and evening. Along the west of the divide, that's monsoon moisture. And I think we're going to tap Pacific moisture. Even there may be a named tropical system that tries to work into Baja in the next maybe 10, 12 days. So I think some headlines are going to be made across the west because of the tropics. Otherwise, nothing going on across the Midwest. You can see a cool front trying to make its way, and the air is still very warm to hot, even north of that boundary into the northern plains and upper Great Lakes region. The showers and thunderstorms are still into play down through the Rio Grande of Texas, scattered across the southeastern states tomorrow morning. By evening time, we do it again, rinse and repeat forecast, as we say, with the four corners, seeing the best likelihood that I-4 corridor. Maybe you get a dust storm and then you get a downpour of rain. They had that in that order sometimes across parts of Arizona, New Mexico this time of the year. Some shower activity up through Big Sky Country and breaking out across the southeastern states, and hardly a drop of rain for the vast majority of the the Corn Belt, maybe some sense of cooling. But still above average readings into the northern reaches coming off the heat. Nothing going on except you can see what does race out of Canada. We are setting up for a pretty impressive, higher than usual likelihood of busting out a couple of derechos here in the next 5 to 7 days, of which tomorrow will hit the northeast of New England, Mount Washington, up through and around downeastern Maine and back into parts of southeastern Canada. There'll be some headlines made there. Next couple of days in the moisture department, centered in Texas, a little lifting northward of that boundary as far south as maybe the northern Delta, still holding on across the southeastern states. Again, more significant rain in the western states. It's nice to see the rains finally come into play after the scope of heat into some of those spring grain areas of North Dakota and southern Canada. If you can squint real hard, you can maybe see the high temperatures for the day today. Again, passing the century mark into North Dakota. There'll be probably some triple-digit readings just north and west of Lake Superior, with mid and upper 90s and some records for parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, the northern plains, and the heat generally still holds on there for the day tomorrow, and still ranging from the upper 80s to mid 90s from south to north across the central plains, livestock country, and the Corn Belt. So kind of, again, a juxtapositioning, a changing around of the atmosphere, not unusual for this scope of El Nino conditions. Again, now kind of really officially, at least from our standpoint, would be categorized at a strong one. Water temperatures are almost 2 degrees above average in the central Pacific. You think that's no big deal? Well, remember, 3/4 of the planet's made up of water, and a good majority of that, of course, impacted west to east with the westerly movement of weather systems across North America. High temps for the day tomorrow, still pushing 90, 95 northern Illinois, probably a little bit 90s Wisconsin, back across the Dakotas. We might see a local 100, maybe just west of the Twins, and there is the relatively cool air. Some spots may not even get past 80 into parts of western and southern Texas. I suspect that's probably good news with livestock operations in mind. But some muddy feedlots, but some drought relief continues on, along with the general cooler spell of weather for the end part of the week over the southwest, parts of West Texas, while the upper 80s and mid 90s continue on across a wide area of the Corn Belt. Some easing of temperatures. There's a couple of cool fronts on the move. They have to bust down the capped atmosphere, so sometimes these fronts look impressive at their get-go, then it's time to make rain and they just don't materialize, and you don't get a lot of significant cooling either. Just the atmosphere is so warm and so ramped up aloft. So Friday to Sunday, there's the hot ridge trying to reestablish itself just north of the Four Corners area. You can see a couple of weather systems, troughs making their way out of Canada, and we'll get kind of a trough position lining up with the ridge along the divide. That means downstream of about 30 to 45 degrees on your pair dividers. Do it old school here. A trough gets going over about the eastern third of the country, and I think this is the setup that we're going to go with here. We'll ebb and flow on temperatures, but generally drier northwest to southeast wind flow and a cool down in temperatures. I wouldn't be surprised if some parts of the Corn Belt, maybe even northern Illinois, that does not get past 80 degrees at some point late this week, more likely mid to late next week, I think. But there are certainly cooler days, slower crop development, great for outdoor work and livestock operations, and the cooling bill as well. So that's the thinking in the moderate range, medium range going forward. And you can see a couple of those cold fronts between Friday and Saturday. They get a little push on southward. The atmosphere is warm, not a lot of Gulf moisture, so it may look impressive back into the western Corn Belt with kind of a little overrunning effect. But other than a thunderstorm cluster or two, and it's these all or nothing setups that will probably get going, just not a lot going on in the gauge. And I think even some of these 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 as it applies to the eastern states and the eastern Corn Belt, maybe a little overdone. Right idea, maybe a little overdone in some of the western ideas of precip as well, but kind of the right orientation here with a dry slot up the middle going forward here in the next few weeks to come. So the heat for now expands back across from the Corn Belt areas and soybean areas, and will probably remain generally below that 95, 96 magic degree temperature standpoint in a fair amount of the central and southern Corn Belt. Up north, maybe different story. I think with time that heat moves back to the west, the the showers, thunderstorms continue in the mid-Atlantic region, where we may have some flooding issues in through Texas. But the likelihood of probably getting into some meaningful rainfall, but again, flash flood potential should help to squelch the fire situation across the western states going forward. The headlines again will be heat over the middle part of the country into the eastern states. We're going to reestablish, by the way, that hot weather pattern in the southeastern part of the country as we begin to break down this whole hot ridge thing over the middle part of the country. Best likelihood of maybe some trouble regarding rainfall will be down through West Texas, the Rio Grande, and across the desert Southwest. For the next 7 to 10 days, will be multi-inch rains. Unfortunately, these things tend to come down, all at once. When you go from nothing to a quick 1 to 2 inches within a 90-minute time frame, there is no way to really get that to absorb quickly into these sandy grounds. Built up metropolitan areas, et cetera, so forth and so on. So that I-4 corridor, Phoenix, Scottsdale, all those places in the Southwest will probably make some headlines, as well as some flash flood potential as far north as Montana. Not a lot going on in the plains, little overdone on the moisture potential, I think, for the far east and southeastern Corn Belt, but the right idea over the southeastern states and Cotton Belt country. There's the next 6 to 10 days. And so that means just a progressive series of weather systems. And the way, you look at this, you look upstream through Alaska, an upper air circulation there. Then you go across into Siberia, and there's no way to really stop any of these systems on their northwest to southeast flow. So like Sarah and I have been talking about, we think, and I don't hear anybody else talking about it, we think we get some cooler days and significantly cooler days ahead. Moisture, maybe kind of scant for the middle part of the country, plains and Corn Belt areas, but certainly a cooler trend for now shaping up going forward. Right idea here, the next 6 to 10 days from the feds, the heat across the western parts of the country, precip about right across the divide and westward, a little overdone in the east to southeastern Corn Belt, but at least normal mid to late July rains are hop, skip, and a jump. Each one is maybe a 30 to 50% coverage outbreak in the wide-ranging rain amounts, so that's par for the course. Mid-July, mid to late July, and mid-summertime expectations. And so we'll just kind of ebb and flow the ridge back and forth. There it is, still stuck in the southwest, the trough in the eastern states, systems over the top, may get a little puff of warmer air to trip off some shower thunderstorm activity. They'll cool down correspondingly, but again, hit, miss, hit, run stuff in the northern and easternmost Corn Belt sections. And monsoon setup continues over the southwest, and generally the right idea. I would like to see this maybe a little cooler than average. I think we have a couple of respectable cool shots for August. Had a gentleman who came up to me, and we were talking at the Historic Farm Days, and I don't know what critter he was looking at, a moth or something like that, and I just couldn't figure it out. Anyway, we timed it out 6 weeks after he sees these critters or insects or whatever. That's the first substantial cool off we have around here that would maybe raise the concern, at least the northernmost end of the Corn Belt, maybe rock growing country, of a little frost towards maybe Labor Day. It's possible. That's kind of what we're thinking about. So a significantly cooler spell of weather ahead for summertime, which is going to slow up crop growth and development. Right idea from the feds 2 weeks out. Maybe even I'd like to see a little somewhat cooler than average. I think this is a lot to lunch for the eastern Corn Belt rainfall. Western states about right. And again, we'll keep an eye on the eastern and northeastern Gulf of Mexico going forward. I think there's going to something try to cook and come out of there going forward. And there's just a lot of wind shear in the open waters of the Atlantic. A week from today is our live stream. We'll cross the T's, dot the I's, put it on paper or on screen, and we'll have an update for you going forward for the rest of summertime, maybe a couple of bullet points on early autumn and harvest. But I think that cooler folks ought to be thinking cooler. I know it's tough to think about now in some of these areas, but a better feel, but at the same time, maybe a slower go of it as we get things back into try to get things towards maturity and the right growing degree of the units going forward here later on this summertime season.
Yep, put that on your calendar next Tuesday. Join us for the longer term outlook.
Yep.
So look forward to that, Greg. Appreciate it. And of course, we'll be touching base with you a little later this week to see how things are progressing and see if there's anything new going on in the weather department.
Absolutely. And until then, everyone stay cool and comfortable out there. Space them out and water them down, right?
There we go. All right. We'll see you later. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.